Hi, welcome back to the bookshelf of timeless classics from the Daily Better, a channel dedicated to sharing personal growth insights through great books. There's a famous saying, our lives change in two ways through the people we meet and the books we read. But in a world overflowing with books and with your time being so limited, have you truly chosen the right ones for yourself? At the Daily Better, one of our guiding principles when choosing books is to seek out those that are often quoted or referenced by other authors. These books are like big fish leading a school in the vast ocean. And among all the psychology books I've read, the one I'm about to share with you today is undoubtedly one of those big fish. It's called Thinking, Fast and Slow, written by Daniel Kahneman. Kahneman was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in 2002, becoming the first psychologist ever to receive this honor since the inception of the Nobel Prize. Interestingly, the 2017 Nobel laureate in economics, Richard Thaler, was actually his student. Both of them dedicated their work to the same fascinating subject, irrationality. I read this book quite a while ago, but because it's so academic and deeply theoretical, I never really thought I'd talk about it in a video. However, as time goes on, I've seen more and more friends in the reading community expressing a desire to dive deeper into their understanding of books, and many have shown an interest in this particular one. So, I realized that we shouldn't stop at practical or tool-based books. It's equally important to explore more advanced works to truly understand the underlying principles behind human thinking. These books might not hand you a quick fix or a tool to instantly change your life, but what they do offer is profound wisdom. They help you better understand yourself. You've probably heard the phrase, just follow your gut, right? It sounds like decent advice, and honestly, in many situations, acting on intuition can get you through. But if you look back, you'll notice that many of the pitfalls we've stumbled into were because we trusted that gut feeling a little too much. Most of the time, our decisions made through intuition aren't all that reliable. We're easily swayed by cognitive biases, emotional impulses, and fleeting impressions. We end up making judgments or decisions that, in hindsight, were flawed. And that's exactly what Daniel points out. In most situations, we humans are not as rational as we'd like to believe. So the question is, how can we avoid these distorted perceptions when making decisions? How can we truly understand the irrational patterns in our own thinking? In the next part of this video, I'll walk you through the most distilled and powerful insights from Thinking, Fast and Slow, to help you avoid those mental traps, sharpen your judgment, and ultimately, make better decisions for yourself. First things first, before we search for ways to improve our judgment and decision-making, we need to understand how our brain actually thinks. Why is this book called Thinking, Fast and Slow? It's because we naturally have two systems of thought in our brains, fast thinking and slow thinking. Daniel Kahneman refers to them as System 1 and System 2. So, what exactly is System 1? Imagine this, you see a girl frowning and staring straight at you, and instantly, you know she's angry. You didn't have to stop and analyze her mood. You didn't need to reflect or reason. You just knew. Or when I ask you, what's 2 plus 6? And you effortlessly answer 8. Tasks that are simple and familiar, where no thinking seems necessary, fall under the domain of System 1. Now, let's try something else. What's 54x, 18, 18, 18? Suddenly, you pause, you think. You may start calculating in your head. This isn't automatic. It demands a bit of mental effort, a bit of time. And this, right here, is when System 2 kicks in. System 1 is our intuitive system. It works subconsciously, responds quickly, and doesn't demand much energy. It's automatic passive, in a way. And when our brain operates in this passive mode, it's happy because it doesn't have to work hard or burn energy. System 2, on the other hand, is the rational system. It requires mental effort, deep focus, and conscious reasoning. It's slow, deliberate, and demanding it burns brain fuel. That's why it's not our default mode. These two systems might sound like they're at odds with each other, but in reality, they constantly interact. For simple, everyday situations, fast thinking leans on experience and intuition to deliver quick judgments. But when a problem becomes too complex for intuition alone, slow thinking steps up, bringing reason and logic into the picture. As the book beautifully puts it, when intuition stumbles, reason rushes in to help. Sounds logical, right? We like to think that this is how we function. But here's the twist. Decades of psychological experiments have shown that irrationality is the foundation of most of our actions. In truth, most of our decisions aren't made with reason, they're made without it. Why is that? Because the human brain is, quite simply, lazy. It doesn't like to focus. It avoids exerting effort. And so, by default, it leans heavily on the effortless judgments of System 1. Eventually, that fast-thinking part of us becomes the one making most of our decisions. Our over-reliance on the fast-thinking system can lead to a serious issue: cognitive bias. In this next part, the Daily Better will summarize 3 common biases and 4 typical effects within System 1 that often lead to distorted thinking and poor decisions. As you listen, take a moment to reflect. Do you recognize any of these thinking habits in yourself? Let's begin with the 3 biases. First, the representativeness bias. We tend to focus too much on what looks typical, while ignoring the underlying probabilities. For example, if you see someone reading a book on the subway or a bus, you might quickly assume that they must be highly educated. That assumption feels intuitive, but it's not necessarily grounded in fact. Second, the availability bias. If something is easily recalled in our minds, we believe it's more likely to happen. For instance, if you've recently heard a lot of news stories about plane crashes, you may become more inclined to drive or take the train, despite the fact that air travel is statistically safer. Your judgment is swayed by what's emotionally vivid and fresh in your memory. Third, the causality bias. Humans have a deep need to explain things. We're wired to search for causes and effects even when there may be none. Take the example of an athlete performing poorly in a competition. People immediately look for reasons. Maybe he was too nervous, or just unlucky, or he didn't train properly. These explanations may be baseless, but we feel more comfortable when we can assign a cause. These are 3 powerful biases that shape the way we perceive the world. So what about the 4 psychological effects that further deepen these biases and lead us to make flawed decisions? Let's take a look. First, we have the halo effect. You're beautiful, you're talented, everything you say must be right. Sounds familiar? It's an incredibly subjective belief, yet most of us are unconsciously influenced by this psychological bias. The halo effect means that the first impression we get can color our entire perception of a person or thing. A classic example is the celebrity effect. Just look at advertisements. How often do you see an unknown person promoting a product? Rarely. Why? Because celebrities are already widely recognized and validated by the public. So, anything they endorse seems instantly more trustworthy, more desirable. But the downside is, we become blind in our admiration. We trust their choices without rational judgment. We don't ask whether the product is actually good, actually necessary, or actually right for us. The same thing happens when we like someone. We tend to assume everything about them is good, even if we barely know them. And the reverse is true as well. Once we dislike someone, we tend to interpret everything about them negatively. That's why first impressions matter so much. Second is the anchoring effect, a distortion in perception caused by prior information. When we evaluate something, we're heavily influenced by what we hear first. We unconsciously set an internal anchor and then adjust our judgments around that. Take promotional sales, for instance. The original price is crossed out, and the sale price is displayed right next to it. That original price becomes your anchor, even if you weren't planning to buy anything. Because of that initial number, the sale now feels like a deal. Sellers are using the anchoring effect to shape your decision-making without you realizing it. Third is the framing effect. This is when the same issue presented in two different ways leads to different reactions and decisions. For example, imagine a doctor talking to a patient's family before surgery. They could say, "The survival rate is 90%," or they could say, "The death rate is 10%. Statistically identical. But emotionally, the first version feels far more reassuring. That subtle change in framing can completely shift how people feel and what they choose. Fourth is the endowment effect. We place higher value on things we already own. That's why many businesses now promise return within 7 days, no questions asked. They're not just being generous. They know that once you take that item home, once it becomes yours, you're far less likely to give it up. You begin to feel attached. You overestimate its value. You start to believe it's essential even when it might not be. In a broader sense, we tend to overvalue what we use, what we love, what we're familiar with, and we hate losing it. Everything I've just shared are examples of common cognitive habits, proof that our brains have limitations we rarely notice. We put too much faith in what we're familiar with. But the truth is, we often have no idea how little we actually know. And we consistently overestimate how clearly we understand the world. So, how can we avoid the traps of cognitive errors? With all the biases and mental illusions swirling in our minds, decisions made through System 1 may feel quick and easy, but they often lack rational judgment. To help you make better decisions, the Daily Better has distilled a few practical strategies inspired by thinking fast and slow. The first method is to truly understand how you think. Self-awareness is key. Once you clearly see your own mental habits, you can begin to adjust them. Earlier, the first summarized some of the most common thinking patterns from the book. There are many more cognitive biases you can explore. Take the time to check if any of them live in your own mind. Second, constantly remind yourself not to rely too heavily on System 1. Before making a decision, before facing a situation, pause. Slow yourself down. Tell yourself to wait a little, to think it through before jumping to a conclusion or reacting. This simple act of slowing down can redirect your mind from impulsive intuition to thoughtful reasoning. Third, practice total focus. System 2 only activates when you're fully engaged, but let's be honest, we live in an age of constant distraction. Our focus is fragile, and our minds are bombarded daily by thousands of thoughts, emotions, and interruptions. To help System 2 step in at the right moments, you must create mental space-time to think, to reflect, to analyze. For me personally, mindfulness and meditation have become powerful tools. Trust me when I say they really do work. These practices train your attention, sharpen your awareness, and bring clarity to the way you live and think. Fourth, never make important decisions on an empty stomach. When your body is low on energy, your brain defaults to System 1. It gets lazy. There's a fascinating study that showed parole judges were far more likely to grant parole after meals. The approval rate jumped to 65% after lunch, nearly double the usual rate. It's not because the cases were different, it's because their brains had been refueled. When you're hungry or drained, you're more prone to risky behavior and reactive choices. System 2 consumes a lot of energy, so make sure your body and brain are fueled before making high-stakes decisions. The real secret to activating System 2 and keeping System 1 in check is to slow down your thinking. But Daniel Kahneman also offers 2 special suggestions to help compensate for the blind spots of fast thinking. First, don't isolate yourself when making decisions. Welcome suggestions. Invite criticism. Challenging your gut feeling might feel uncomfortable, but remember this truth. We're far better at spotting the mistakes of others than recognizing our own. So let others in. Their perspectives could save you from missteps you wouldn't see coming. Second, conduct a premortem. Sounds a bit grim, right? But it's a brilliant exercise. Before finalizing a decision, pretend that it failed. Assume the plan went wrong. Then write down why it failed, what went wrong, what could have caused it. By doing this, you train your mind to prepare, anticipate, and think more strategically. It's a powerful way to increase your chances of success both in work and in life. That's everything I've distilled from this incredible book. Once again, I think we owe a sincere thank you to the author, Daniel. And before we close, let's hold on to one powerful message from this book. We humans have two thinking systems, the intuitive and the rational, and irrationality is the foundation of most of our actions. Remember this truth as a gentle reminder to yourself. Slow down, stay focused. Let your rational mind step in before you make your next decision. Thank you for listening to The Daily Better, a channel dedicated to sharing personal growth insights through great books. If you found today's video helpful, please share it with someone who might need it. Support us by clicking like, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss our weekly uploads. And if you have any thoughts or feelings to share, drop them in the comments below. Thank you, goodbye, and see you in the next video.